This is our group presentation on the leverage buyout of Alltel Corporation. I'm Jacob Morrison.
Mark Andrews,
Guilherme Imbico,
and Alex Park.
In 1943, Allied Telephone Company was born, and they maintained and installed local telephone poles and provided phone services and equipment to businesses. In 1960, Mid-Continent Corporation was founded in Hudson, Ohio, and they provided similar services as Allied, but they also sought to purchase smaller companies in the same industry. On October 25, 1983, Allied Telephone Company and Mid-Continent Corporation merged and formed Alltel Corporation. This merger formed the fifth largest telecommunication with $1.35 billion in assets. From 1983 to 1998, Allied Telephone Company continued their rapid growth by purchasing and merging with other companies in the market. They also spent $360 million to upgrade their equipment. In 1993, they added wireless communication to their company, and in 1996, former President Bill Clinton passed the Telecommunications Act, which deregulated this market, making it more competitive and caused for growth. In 1999, Allied Telephone Company purchased 5 wireless companies, which increased their wireless coverage to 24 states, and their revenue reached $6.3 billion. In 2003, they opened their first wireless store, and in 2005, they announced they would be a wireless-only company. With all of this activity, the telecommunication industry was priming itself for mergers as the Federal Communications Commissions loosened regulations on the amount of spectrum a carrier could hold in an area. The FCC also bumped the spectrum allocations from 45 MHz to 55, enticing companies to combine their assets to better please customers who were now demanding faster speeds with text messaging, email, and wireless web access. Alltel bundled their services together and offered long-distance, local telephone, paging, wireless, and internet services. Alltel was an attractive company for a leverage buyout because of these recent changes in the industry, and they had some of the important characteristics necessary for an LBO. Alltel was the 5th largest wireless phone carrier in 2008, were rated among the best-run companies in the nation, had a considerably low debt-to-equity ratio. The ratio was 45%, which is far below the average in the industry. This meant that the purchaser would be able to pay off the debt of the acquisition relatively quickly. Alltel also had the possibility of selling non-core assets.
As of December 29th, there would have been a 20% premium paid on Alltel stock, but information was leaked about the potential buyout. In 2.5 months, the stock price jumped 10%, driving down the premium. On May 20th, Alltel announced the LBO at $27.5 billion, after JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, and Stephens, the advisors to the board of Alltel, said $71.50 was a fair price. The buyer of Alltel was named as Atlantis Holdings LLC, which was sponsored by both TPG Capital and Goldman Sachs Capital Partners. The deal closed November 16th, and the following June, Atlantis Holdings was able to sell Alltel to Verizon Wireless at $28.5 billion. The LBO had a fast turnaround time and increased the value of Alltel by $600 million. Major players in the LBO were TPG Capital and Goldman Sachs Capital Partners. These two firms have worked on many other deals together, including LBOs targeting Burger King, Biomet, and TXU. There were several important people in this LBO, including Alltel's chief executive Scott Ford and other important players within Alltel that stayed on through the LBO. It is worth noting Alltel's top 5 executives would have got a combined $250 million if they had left during a change in control. Both the head of the merchant banking division at Goldman Sachs, Richard Friedman, and a founding partner of TPG, Jim Coulter, said they purchased Alltel as a strategic investment and wanted to increase the value of the firm through growth. There were also other parties interested in Alltel, including private equity clubs and market competitors. 2 clubs interested in Alltel as an investment would have had a bidding round on June 6, 2007, before Alltel was bought out by TPG Capital and Goldman Sachs. They were not the only interested parties, though. Verizon Wireless, AT&T, and Sprint all looked at Alltel as a strategic acquisition. They were looking to increase their market share in the wireless industry through purchases that created synergies with existing assets. Verizon did end up buying Alltel after the LBO.
These are the ratios. We feel that the three most important ratios are debt to equity, used to measure the company's leverage, calculating by dividing total liabilities by its stockholders' equity. Debt to capital, the ratio measures the company's financial structure and degree of leverage. That is how we can figure out how much risk Alltel may have as well as profits. Debt to EBITDA, measure of a company's ability to pay off its debt.
The financing structure is made up of debt from Citigroup and Goldman Sachs Investment Bank, and the equity is from Goldman Sachs Capital Partners and TPG Capital. The total debt makes up 87% of the deal. This debt is from bridge loans and senior debt. The remaining 17% comes from actual equity. Parties engaging in an LBO transaction must comply with both state and federal laws. These laws apply to acquisitions of public companies going private and include fiduciary duties, procedural safeguards, and required disclosures. These requirements are designed to largely to protect the stockholders and the public at large. Corporate and legal filings needed to be sent to the Federal Communications, Commerce, Department of Justice, and shareholders, and the SEC. The Hart-Scott-Rodino Act, created in 1976, is a federal pre-merger notification that notifies the Federal Trade Commission and Department of Justice of any large M&A deals. This is done so that the U.S. government can monitor deals that have the potential to adversely affect U.S. commerce under the antitrust laws. If so, the Department of Justice will take legal action to stop the acquisition. The Federal Communications Commission also needed to approve the deal, as it was the biggest communications deal ever at that point in the U.S. Stockholders had to have a 90% approval to complete the acquisition of Alltel. And finally, the SEC needed to be notified because Alltel needed to delist all their shares from the New York Stock Exchange. This is a result of Alltel changing from a public to a private company. PwC conducted the external audit for Alltel and found that there were no legal issues and their accounting standards complied with U.S. GAAP.
Goldman Sachs and TPG Capital wanted to sell Alltel because the debt required to purchase Alltel was showing up on their books as a loss. The three typical exit strategies for LBOs are to offer an IPO and take the company public again, sell to another investment bank, or ideally sell to a strategic buyer because they can pay the most for the company and are able to pay back the debt required from the purchase. Goldman Sachs and TPG Capital were able to sell to Verizon in 2008.
Verizon acquired Alltel for $28.1 billion, $5.9 billion for the equity, and they took on $22.2 billion in debt. One of the points made by the parties involved was that Verizon would combine their 67 million customers with the 13 million customers from Alltel. More customers, more sales. Another point they were looking at was the fact that both companies shared the same technology, which were CDMA and 3G wireless network. Basically, there wasn't the need to invest any money primarily in technology with this acquisition. Advances in Verizon's wireless technology came later. The rationale behind the numbers was to improve customers' experience through adding to the customer's base and to increase its market share. With the acquisition, Verizon became the largest U.S. wireless operator ahead of AT&T.
In this arrangement, the FCC required Verizon to divest overlapping properties in 105 markets in 24 states, with approximately 2.1 million customers. The most recent news about Alltel occurred in 2013 when AT&T purchased the remaining divestitures from Verizon Wireless. This purchase added 620 customers and serviceable to 4.6 million people, mainly in rural areas for AT&T.